Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking TRM, the podcast. My name is Bex Deadman, also known as Travel Risk Bex. Today, I get really excited when one of these happens because it's very rare. I'm joined by a guest today who actually contacted me because of the podcast ages and ages and ages and ages and ages ago. And he was really enthused about what we were doing and around the conversations that we were having around travel risk management and trying to kind of widen the aperture and perhaps put people in focus. And we've had loads and loads and loads of really interesting, in-depth conversations since then. And I've kind of followed what you've done from a couple of different roles and potentially kind of what the future looks like for you. And I have to say, I just really enjoy talking to this person. And we just thought, you know what, we should definitely do a recording because if our conversations mean anything to us, then hopefully they might have some wider noise too. And I really want to introduce you to this person because he's a really different thinker, an incredible mind, and young with lots of energy to change the world. And that's kind of what we need. So without further ado, who are you, my guest, and what do you do?
Wow, thanks, Bex. My name is Shawn Woods. I work in a critical infrastructure sector where I get to design security in some pretty hostile places around the globe. And now, actually, Bex, um, can you believe it? I'm an entrepreneur.
I love
Entrepreneur,
it.
right? For the
Love it.
first time in my life, I spent my entire life in public sector, and now I'm moving in an entrepreneur. And I'm just thrilled to be here.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. I usually start any conversation with any of my guests as to how are you, and Shawn is always wonderful. Honestly, that's always his response, but genuinely is, and then tells me exactly why he's wonderful. And whatever adversity you seem to have had, you seem to have got over. So, I'm really interested in perhaps our guests exploring a little bit more about how you've got to where you've got to. So perhaps a little bit more
Mm,
about your
yeah.
past roles and I guess how we connected and then and
Mm.
then potentially we can kind of get into your why because I think you are you're a really thoughtful and reflective person, but you're always wanting to kind of make improvements and make things better.
Mm.
And I think what you're doing now and some of the exciting things you'll be doing in the future are really worth us having a conversation. But let's talk about where it all started, shall we?
Yeah. I remember when I sort of started getting into the risk management space, it was actually in the Navy. I was what's called a Naval Warfare Officer with the Royal Canadian Navy, and I loved it. I love just how we thought about having certain objectives, certain goals, certain missions, and then navigating the uncertainty that we experience when we're trying to accomplish something. What's the weather going to do? How's that going to prevent us from accomplishing that search and rescue? Or, whatever it is, there's always uncertainty all around us, right? And that principle, of course, extends to business, it extends to everyday office life, it extends to, traffic and getting your Starbucks. Um, but I started and I loved it, but I got horrible seasickness. And of course, getting to drive ships is just you can't do it, Bex, when you're just puking over the side, right? And so for me,
No, God,
no.
it's the
So
worst one of all of them. That was the worst one to choose, but who knew?
yeah, it was horrible. But after that, so I had to sort of figure out what to do afterwards, and I just started applying to the Canadian Public Service, and really just anything. It wasn't about security, it wasn't about risk management. It was just sort of if anyone could have me, if anyone could help me, stop being sick on ship, I would be so eternally grateful. And I was picked up by this agriculture organization, and the CFO just said, Shawn, can you just help us reset and rebuild our security function? And we were a small organization. There was only a couple of us, which meant we got to sort of get our hands in whatever was helpful for our organization. And being in an agriculture organization, we in a government agriculture organization, we wanted to help food security. We wanted to help, we see all of the countries around the globe that don't have enough food, people that are just starving all around. And so part of the rule that we had was let's go to those countries, let's market our grain, let's talk about how our science can be used for global good. And so that sort of suggested, we've got this travel piece, and some of the countries that we're going to, they can be a bit risky. What are we going to do about that? And so that's when I got into your podcast. I just started, on Spotify, travel risk, travel security, risk management, whatever I could find. And I came across Talk'n TRM. And then it just became my thing. Every day when I would go to the gym, when I'd have lunch, it would just be popping in your podcast, and there'd be little nuggets, data governance, how to deal with taxis, how to deal with hotels, how to deal with building a program that is measurable, that you can monitor, that you can review, and it just gave me so many little pieces. Of course, I needed to get more. I needed to get it from the source. And that's when I reached out to you. I think on LinkedIn, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful that you didn't think I was spam or or anything else. Um, and that's
Not
sort
at
of,
all. And it was, I was smiling then because obviously I forget not everyone can see me when I'm smiling. I need to say something. I was nodding and smiling. But no, I'll never forget when it came through because it well, only really just there'd been a few episodes, obviously, for you to kind of be listening to and kind of get it. But yeah, I think
mhm.
you were kind of my first. I don't want to say fan because that sounds weird, but the first
Oh, but I
person
was.
kind of
That's okay, Bex. I
I
am a
can't say
fan.
it. I can't say it.
I love the
Um,
work that you do here. It's amazing.
No, the first person to come forward, and actually then afterwards, a couple of other people came forward as well. So it became something, and it was I suddenly,
Mm,
I think for the first time, realised that I was having an impact. Whereas before, it was just with respect, me sitting in a room talking to friends about this thing, and I suddenly was like, oh, people are actually listening to this, really listening to
mm,
this. Okay, so it
yeah,
really meant an awful lot to me. But as
yeah.
did the further conversations that we had about it, because as we discussed a lot of, and the reason I started the podcast, for those of you that have been listening avidly for all of these months and years now, is because there just wasn't that much out there about travel risk
Mm,
management at its widest
yeah,
reach.
so true.
For those people kind of
Yeah,
wanting to kind of get into it but didn't know where to start, for those people maybe not necessarily working in security, but even those people working in security, actually, what does the travel bit
yeah,
mean? We don't really know that
yeah.
bit. So that's why we did it. And I think over the years, we've just had some incredible guests come and talk about all sorts of different things. And yes, there's a
Mm,
book out there probably, isn't it, based on these podcasts. So
absolutely.
to talk to me, so travel was obviously a big part then. So as when you were developing a security system for this
Hmm.
department, you were able to
Yeah,
bring travel risk then into this. Um, I know that you were a fan of 31
yeah.
or are a fan of
Oh, yeah,
3130 and have used the standards. So let's talk a little bit about
yeah.
how that's helped you as well.
Mm. Um, yeah, because we were building a whole program at this organization, I aligned everything I did to 31,000, which is ISO's more general risk management standard. And then, of
Hmm.
course, 31030 is specific to travel risk, but it uses the same risk management process as 31,000, which I think is amazing because as an organization, if you're creating multiple security programs, risk programs, if you're doing different risk criteria, or it's just horrible. It's going to cause so many problems across, when you're briefing executives, even when you're just trying to understand what does a medium risk look like, it gets very confusing. And so I love that, just even sticking with ISO alone, I love that ISO has this sort of holistic, coordinated nature amongst all of its sections. And so the TRM standard, the 31030, what I thought was really helpful was when it gets into journey management. And why I was thinking that is it really helped me sort of frame the program and understand the traveler from, when they leave Canada or even pre, leaving Canada actually, all the way to when they're home and getting back to work. But even, if there is something that goes wrong, what does that kind of aftermath look like? And I think 3130 does a really good job at looking at that. But I also think what I noticed was really different is in travel risk management, you can't apply the same types of controls as you can with other types of risk management. Picture like where you are, you're in the UK right now.
Hmm.
In all sorts of security interventions, you've got a stable government, you've got law enforcement, 999 or 991 if you're in Canada, you got medical attention, you've got, you have all of these things that we just assume, we just count on, they're just part of everyday life. Even preventing crime, how we do that, there's so many institutions and authorities to help with that. But when you're in a travel risk management state and you're going to a country where you don't have control over whether police are going to respond, you don't have control over the hotel environment, and people that have access to your door or to your safe or to your whatever, to your data, where you have different government rules, privacy rules. There's all these differences. And what I love about TRM is, or ISO 3130, is it's practical. It focuses on the variables that you can change, that you can impact, and not sort of leave you hanging with this reality that you're in a different place and you can't navigate that in the same way that you would navigate risk in a certain country that you're in.
It flexes, doesn't it?
It
And
does.
it gives you this. And I think I'm so glad that we had this, that we actually included this in the conversation today, because I think you're absolutely right. And I think ISO will hopefully be grateful, and TC262 will be grateful to hear you say it, because a lot
Mm,
of consideration was given as to
mm,
how it mirrored 31,000, and how actually it mirrored other standards that businesses use regularly, so that it
yeah,
didn't feel like, oh, we're starting from scratch again. It felt
yeah,
like it was an addition, a bolt on, another
yeah,
viewpoint, if you like, to the risk management process, which can be aligned to so many different sectors and industries. What I
yeah.
think was particularly rewarding about travel risk management is the work that's now continued since then, because the industry grabbed this standard with both hands. Not
Mm,
necessarily the travel industry themselves; they're still grabbing. They're there. They're coming
yeah.
slowly, but security certainly grabbed it with both hands. Assistance have grabbed it with both hands. And insurance have been really interested in it as well. So we're trying to bring
Mm,
these behemoth sectors
interesting.
together. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's changing all of that, and it's creating new jobs, it's creating new roles, it's creating
Wow.
new structures within organizations. Because you need a standard to start from that
Hmm.
start in order to be able to
You
do
do.
it. But it's important for those who write standards, those who get involved with standards, to actually hear what you guys think. So thank you for
Mm,
sharing all of that. It's really, really helpful. So let's talk about what happened next in your journey.
yeah. Um, After that organization, I moved to another government department. This one was designing security of certain sensitive facilities all around the globe. And and
Wow.
again, it was the exact same sort of thing that I was talking about, which is really based in this idea of travel risk management. You're in a foreign country and you have to adhere to those rules, and you're trying to provide security, which can be very difficult depending on what that country is. And one of the things that sort of inspired me from travel risk management was actually something called situational crime prevention. You ever heard of this? Situational crime prevention?
No, tell us.
So, situational crime prevention, or SCP, is sort of this idea that it's the environment that creates the crime. And that's an interesting idea because when you think, imagine like this scenario, okay? When when you see me speed on a road, okay, and I'm flying in and out of cars, if you're like me, the first thing you think about is, uh, who's this guy? Like, he's dangerous. The police, I hope there's a police officer there to catch him, right? That guy's got to be stopped. Or if I'm maybe an employee in a company and I do something wrong, I do something that the management doesn't like, the first thing is always to say, well, who is that person? We have to stop them. But then notice when the roles are reversed. When I
Yeah.
do something, I don't think, oh, I'm an awful person. I think, oh, well, because it's the environment. My management is bad, or my certain types of crimes. I have no money, or I only have friends that are criminals. My influences are all negative. The system has failed me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In academia, they call that the fundamental attribution error. And it's this idea that with others, we say they're awful people, they're bad people, the police need to arrest them. When it's ourselves, we say it's the system, it's the environment. And situational crime prevention says the reality is the environment does create the crime. Yes, of course, people have their own agency, but the environment creates the crime. And I think why that connection with child risk management was so important to me is because we can't create um, crime prevention policies in foreign states, right? When we're operating, if you're a data center owner and you want to create a data center in a foreign country, you can't work with the government to say we're going to create this beautiful, crime prevention policy that's going to raise your economic living. It's not happening. But what you can do is you can say, how can we redesign our environment, whether it's how the site looks, and then even as management, how do we manage in a way that creates crimes? Like I recently read an article that said the overwhelming majority of organizations experience insider threats. These are people that are leaking insensitive information.
Sure.
Sometimes, especially with travelers, they're not intentionally leaking. Sometimes they're just having a laptop on a hotel Wi-Fi and they have no idea that they shouldn't be buying with a company credit card, and they wonder why
Yeah.
their company was defrauded, right? But so we have these kind of like benevolent insiders in a way, and of course there's malicious as well. But what this research said was actually the majority of insider threats are caused by bad management, and it's often, especially with the ones that are just trying to be benevolent and they're paying for stuff or they're doing sensitive work on hotel Wi-Fi's. It's because there's a culture of productivity first.
I
There's
hear
this
you.
drive from executives, right? Be productive, be
Yeah.
productive, be productive. And we forget that it's people first. And when we put productivity first, that's when we start to get insider threats. And so your risks start happening. And it's the same thing with travel risk management. If you take the lens of how does our environment cause risks, then you're really going to start to critically work through those problems. And I think you're going to start preventing things like sensitive data loss through hotel Wi-Fi's or through airplane Wi-Fi's, etc. And so I've been just loving this idea. I don't think it's like an anarchy self. I love, rules and laws, and I think they're good for society. Um, but I also just think there seems to be a lot of research that really supports that crime is created because the environment creates the opportunities for crime to happen. And so if we can tweak the environment, we can control for crime. And I think that's a really interesting idea.
I love this. Okay, let's get into this just a tiny bit more for our listeners because we've never talked about anything like this, Shawn. I knew we'd go
Mm.
there. Thank you. Um, Guaranteed. So let's talk about that. What is it? What do we mean about tweaking the environment? So I'm
Hmm.
going to go back when we're talking about travel risk specifically. So let's go
Yeah.
back to this idea of poor management,
Hmm.
bad management, maybe a lack of
Yeah.
structures. So we think about our average, and I think this so leans into exactly what you were talking about. So I don't think people are doing things maliciously most of the
Mm.
time. I
Yeah,
think
of course not. Yeah.
they're tired, they're
Yeah.
exhausted, they're not
Yeah.
aware of the threats. We talk about business travel a lot as practitioners to say that this is not it's
Mm.
not glamorous in any way, shape or form. It might
Yeah.
be if I don't know, maybe if you're an influencer on Instagram and you manage to get first class everywhere, but for your average business travel is not glamorous.
Yeah.
It's exhausting, it's relentless, and the mentality of the organisation, certainly in a capitalist society, is we're paying you enough. This is why we're paying you enough. Go do what
Hmm.
you need to go and do, right? We're beginning to understand the detriment to mental health, we think, or there's
Mm.
not a lot of, and there's not enough studies happening to correlate it, but I think just as we
Yeah.
begin to understand it, well-being is certainly a consideration. However, what are we actually doing with that? Are we actually doing anything with
Mm.
that? Is there data around it, or are we just throwing words out? Are we throwing words out like sustainability because we should
Yeah.
be, but actually is we're not doing anything. So
Mm.
I think there's lots and lots of challenges, which is why I'm kind of into this.
Yeah.
So bad bad management. I love it. I'm going to just
Yeah.
stick with those two for
Yeah.
now because it does. It
It
epitomizes there is
is.
no management of travel risk management for most organizations. Nobody's looking at this holistically. This is
Yeah.
why I love the way that your brain works. So what do we think? What do we change? How do we? What do we do to change the environment? Just chucking it back to you, Sean.
Yeah. I was reading this really neat book this past week by an individual named Alan Waring, and he gets at the risk cultures, right? I think ISO 3130 talks about risk cultures too.
Mm.
And when you have an organization that has a culture of what can we get away with, like that's just sort of their default, like, we exist to make money. Let's say
Uh-huh.
that's their why. I would argue a horrible why, but let's say that's their why is to make money. They're going to have this sort of what can we get away with mentality because it's all in the pursuit of money. And when you have that, there's case study after case study after case study to say that those types of companies are going to die relatively quickly. There's always exceptions. Think of major institutions that get bailed out by governments, right? Which is, I mean, good and bad on various levels. Um, but this what can we get away with mentality, we see that creep into travel risk management, right? We need to do business in this foreign company. We see that the government website says, it's a very high risk country for all of these different reasons. And I sometimes I just when I hear us, sending people to certain countries, on the one hand, our business objectives might be really quite altruistic and beautiful, and it might be about helping those countries. Think of a lot of non-for-profits that are delivering amazing resources to some people in dire need. That's
Yeah.
amazing, and that's probably a worthy
Yeah.
cause. But other times, it's in the pursuit of money. And as soon as you start putting lives on the line for money, I just think we ought to get a little uncomfortable, and it does stem from this, what can we get away with?
Yeah.
And I think ISO 3130 would really be satisfied if we could move from this culture of what can we get away with to what does good governance look like in this space. And that's even think of the productivity culture as just a single environmental variable that we could tweak or play with, right, in our management process. If you're focused on that variable alone, um, I wonder what would change. Well, I mean, we know the research would say the insider risks are going to go down, which means businesses are going to stop losing sensitive information. Probably people will stop getting defrauded through identity theft because there's sensitive customer information that's being leaked through an airport Wi-Fi. Again, not maliciously, but nonetheless, it's going out the door. And so even just tweaking that, and while all companies exist to be productive, to achieve something, some end, and you have to make money, I think it can be as subtle as what if we've refocused, go back to kind of Simon Sinek's why, right? And
I
and
was
just sort of
about to say I knew it was coming. So Simon, this is a shout out to you. We're both big
yeah.
fans.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant thought leader, right? Um, if we just move away from the purpose of business is to make money, which really it came from an economist, Milton Friedman, late 1900s. That's not how the majority of the world ever operated. That's a relatively new phenomena in recent decades and a horribly destructive phenomena. And I think that's why Sinek is so valuable here, is he's saying, a company's why is what was the raison d'etre, the reason why those founders created the business? And it wasn't to make money. It wasn't. There was something underneath that, whether it was to make consumers' life easier
Yeah.
or to solve a problem in the environment, whatever it was, there was something. And if we can get back to that, I think we're going to reframe our approach to more, um, we're going to be kind to the world, and we might make some money doing it. And I think that's a far better approach than we're going to get rich and we might have a positive impact on the world. I think that approach, it creates insider risks and your company's going to lose money, and the external communities of customers that you have their information on, they're going to continue to be defrauded, all because you've got these two factors backwards. And so if we can just tweak these, I think there's enough research out there that suggests that it's going to make an enormous difference in bringing down your risk, and you solve for your duty of care. So you're compliant with what courts are going to hold you to,
Yeah.
but you're also going to keep your employees. To me, focus on
It
people.
Right? It makes sense. It's just a shift, isn't it? And I think this is where, again, it links into travel risk management, and we talk about it a lot. And to tie this all back in with this sort of standard, there's a whole piece at the
Hmm.
beginning which is around understanding your external and internal risks and being
Hmm.
able to
Hmm.
define that. And in order to be able to define that, you need to understand why you travel.
Hmm. Hmm.
Such a simple question to ask and an almost impossible question to answer. You can answer it
Mm.
at a very high level, but that's not
Yeah.
what we're interested in travel risk management. I want to look at this at the macro level, but also the micro
Mm.
level, because that's where the gaps, that's where your people, which let's get back, this is exactly what ties back into travel risk management being holistic. It's about your
Yeah.
people risk management. And this
That's right.
broad stroke approach that we do isn't working. This idea of managing it through a certain amount of organizations, an 80% rule that if we get that right,
Mm.
that's good enough. And this idea that actually the entire travel industry, and I'll say it, is ultimately commercial minded above all
Hmm.
else. And don't get
Yeah.
me wrong, I hear it. I know
Yeah.
that we have to make money, but not knowing, forgetting why you do it and forgetting the purpose in the first place and actually taking your customers for granted is kind of where we're at in this whole space at the moment. But there needs to be room for innovation in that. And I
Yeah.
think what's interesting is your generation and the generation coming up behind you are seeing things so differently. If my generation and certain people within it, who have followed Simon Sinek and other people like him who have gone, hold on, this isn't quite what I was sold. This isn't quite what I
Mm.
thought corporate life was. This isn't quite what I invested my time and my life to. There's something that's gone askew here. There's more and more of us thinking like that, and that's why potentially, hopefully, companies of the future will think differently. And I really think, I know I always get back to travel risk management. I know I'm obsessed with it, but because there's no better way of proving to your people that you care about them in
Oh,
every possible way
absolutely.
you can care about a human than by getting this program right. Like it
Mm.
just, but also understanding why you do it in the first place and being willing to go, you know what? The way we used to travel, it might have suited us 30 years ago. It's not
That's
right
right.
now. It's not
That's right.
right for the planet. It's not right for our people. It's not right for all these other things. But again, and it saddens me, but you look at the
Mm.
numbers and we're traveling more than we ever did, Sean. We're
Hmm.
not thinking about it
Absolutely. Absolutely.
collectively. We're still pushing forward. But is that, as we've talked about, is it bad management? Oh, I knew this conversation was going to fly. So, what's important is that I just knew it was. I'm looking at the time going, no, we need more time. So, what I want to try and get to is so look, everyone who's listening to this, I knew that this was going to be a different kind of conversation. Sean is
Mm.
incredible. The way he thinks is incredible. And now, as an entrepreneur, he is
Mm.
looking at other things, aren't you? So, Sean, let's talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit. I want you to have opportunity to share with us what you do, and where it's. We've talked about where it's come from. I think your
Yeah.
why is loud and clear. It's about
Hmm.
people, and it's about
Yeah.
change, and it's about doing things differently.
Yeah.
Um, so, tell us where you are now, and perhaps let's talk about and tie in some golden nuggets about maybe
Mm.
how can people take your way of seeing the world and
Yeah.
make us all better. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, my wife and I, um, we sort of talked about, what is the quickest way to be a CEO? And she said, well, you just start your own business and then you call yourself the CEO. We thought, oh, great. And so that's what we did. We created this business, but it was really based in the why of, if we can build better organizations, better workspaces, then that's when people can use their craft in order to go and accomplish the world problems. Because when we have organizations that see our employees as resources, right? Or assets is, the risk management term, which is a horrible term to use. Um, it it is about pushing employees down. And we learn in systems theory that actually the things that thrive are a bottom up. You know, uh, Biological organisms thrive in all sorts of crazy, chaotic climate change stuff that's happening because they're able to adapt. And the adapting doesn't happen at the executive level. The adapting happens at the employee level. And so when we can adapt as an organization from the bottom up, that's when we're going to get to thrive. And so we had this idea of like, well, why is it that we see in news, in case studies, in journal articles that organizations are one, the life cycle of like a Fortune 500 company in the last 30 years, it's gone from like 30 something years to about 12 years. That's the life cycle. So
Mhm.
organizations' lifespans are getting drastically shorter. Employees are feeling more and more quashed. We're dealing with a change in culture where employees are no longer interested in I'm going to work 100 hours a week and I'm going to do like an early retirement. That's of no interest now, right? Times are changing, generations are changing. That's not a winning
Because it
business
doesn't work.
solution.
Honestly, we're all going, no, not enough hours in the day. Carry on, it's
No,
fine. But this is it, right? You've
exactly.
seen a different way of living. You've seen what your parents have gone through. You've seen what your grandparents have gone through, and it's like, hang on, we're changing this up. What's happening?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that's what we wanted to do is what if we can rethink how businesses lead, how businesses manage? How might that help their employees go and solve the world's problems? Because all employees, everybody, we all want to solve world's problems. You know, we see problems every day and we want to solve them. That's why entrepreneurs create a business. Because you want to solve a problem. It's not because it's an easy life. You want to solve a problem.
It's definitely not an easy
Um,
life.
no, and so that's why we're focusing on that management consulting aspect is to really to see if we can maybe have an impact there and empower others to go. And it's been fun. It's been a wonder to just get to even talk with future clients and hear sort of how do they think about risk? How do they think about their people? What role do their people play at their organization? What do they see are the major uncertainties that lie ahead, and how uncomfortable do they feel dealing with them? So that's been really 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 fun. Um, how did you feel, Bex, when you went out as an entrepreneur? What was sort of some general feelings that you had in doing that?
I knew you were going to tell
Sorry,
me something
not
genuine.
sorry,
I was just
not
waiting. I'm like, hang on a minute.
the.
No, it's good. I don't mind sharing. I'm terrified for the most part,
Yeah.
but also, I think I remember speaking to people early days when I had absolutely no money, and I still have very limited money for everyone just out there. I'm not
Yeah.
some millionaire.
Entrepreneur
It's,
life.
these crazy ideas of you can make millions in seconds.
Yeah.
Come on, it's
Yeah.
tough. And it's a particularly
Yes.
tough when you're taking the stance that we did, which was not just with my consultancy, but
Mm,
more so with the Travel Risk Academy, which was we need to create a place that's unbiased. That was our why. It was our coming together of
mm,
4 or 5 industries to explain and put the standards together of what travel risk management and a place for everybody to come and learn. And in order to do that,
yeah.
we couldn't take loads of money in from loads of other people. We had
Hmm.
to just do it ourselves. And it's been really hard. And there's been times that I've just been like, is this the right way to do it? What have we done here? And also I wanting to try lots of different things. And I think but that also is what's driven me forward. So I think
Mm,
I was scared because I didn't quite know exactly what it is that we were doing when we started. Can I say it like that?
yes.
Like I had a
Absolutely.
vision, I had a plan,
Yeah.
sort
Yeah.
of, but I didn't know. And I think this is for all entrepreneurs. We think we know we're going somewhere, but there's a point that you have to stop and listen to
Mm,
everyone around you. Not everyone does that, especially tech developers. They just
mm.
keep going. But it's really important stop and listen to everyone around you and what they're saying. So we were getting a lot of love and
Yeah.
a lot of noise, but we knew that the thing that people wanted more than anything else were the qualifications, and that's what we would
Mm,
always wanted to do. And having done that this year, that's been utterly transformative for us.
mm,
And it's brought together so many other things that I was trying to achieve earlier on, but couldn't until we'd reached this point. But now somehow all of
mm,
those ideas have come together. So we're in a really exciting phase now. I won't say it's working any less because we are working harder than we've ever
mm.
worked, but we're doing it with the people that we always designed the TRA for. And then this will be the next development for us. So
Amazing.
this is why I wanted to have a conversation with you and I
Amazing.
wanted other people to hear it because what we're talking about with travel risk is one element, but we're talking about a culture change. We're
Yeah.
talking about the way we look at business, the way we look at everything that we do, those kind of sales 101 presentations that we all went to, tear it up, throw it away, and start thinking about what it is that we do. I remember always thinking that. I'm like, why are we teaching people how to sell? When the key
Mm.
is find out if they want it, and if they want it, sell it to them, and if they don't bother, move on. But it's these incredible, like these incredible kind of, but this is how you talk them around and do
Yes,
this and do that.
yes,
And it's like, well, maybe you're just selling them the wrong thing. Maybe the why isn't
yes.
there. Maybe you've missed something. And I feel
Hmm.
like there's companies now beginning to challenge that and change that. And I hope we're a new era of
Yeah,
organization that does that. And, you know, we will stay in contact with you. We will support everything
yeah,
that you're doing because we are when we talk about travel risk management, we are going into businesses. I'm doing it, on a daily basis with my clients. So are all of my other consultants around, other consultants around, not mine, friends and consultants around me. And
yeah,
we are constantly challenged that people want to look into this, but they don't really have the budget. They don't actually want to go
mm,
full ham and get this right.
yeah,
Um, for lots and lots of different reasons. But the reality is, get this right, and it will affect everything else positively in your organization. And I've said it.
absolutely,
I'm going to
absolutely.
say this to someone specifically who I know listens to this podcast because he's been listening to it. And 6 months, I promise you. And then from that point on, it's going to be much easier. It's 6 months of
Mm,
hard work up front. And then actually, you get this stuff in place and see the effect it has across the organization because
yeah,
it's not siloed. Just like
yeah,
everything you're talking about, it's about putting our people first.
that's right.
There you go. You interviewed me at the end. So
I
let's just
had to get it in.
before we close, because we have gone over
Mm,
slightly, but I think it's been a brilliant conversation, Shawn, and I thank you for
yeah,
your thoughts, the way you consider things, and I thank you for being a fan as well of what we're doing because
of course.
I can't tell you how much it does actually put wind under your
Mm,
wings when you hear people actually appreciating what you do. So
yeah.
in our final closing moments, any golden nuggets, any thoughts that you want to share with our
Mm.
listeners before we say goodbye?
Yeah, things helpful for me was one, remembering that it's the environment that creates the criminal opportunity. Just change the environment, you'll control for crime. Um, the second one would be probably that good security is kind or generous. Perhaps that's a better word. Good security is generous, and if you do security well, then it's going to have amazing ripples, not just in your organization, but it's going to have big impact on the market. It's going to have big impact on local communities as well as the environment. So really, don't overlook what we would, some would consider to be the soft skills of security. Right? They're not soft skills. They're some of the harder skills, I think. Um,
Sure.
but it's a generous activity that you can do for your organization and community.
Shawn, thank you so, so much for joining us. I told you it was going to fly by, didn't I? It's gone,
Oh my
just like
goodness, that
that.
did fly.
I
Wonderful,
know, I know.
wonderful. Thank you,
Um,
Bex.
Thank you so, so much. So, everybody, you have been listening to the fantastic Shawn Woods, now an entrepreneur with all of his security background, has just set up a consultancy. So, if you want to have more conversations like this as to how perhaps you can rethink your risk management and travel risk management, but actually your organizations with a
Mm.
people focus, get in touch with him because he's really worth having a chat with. Um, and he's a good friend. I hope I get to see you
Mm.
when I go to Canada in a couple of months, and it will be great to
Absolutely.
catch up in person. So, everybody, thank you for listening. You have been listening to another episode of Talking TRM, the podcast. We've been joined today by Shawn Woods. My name is Bex Deadman, also known as Travel Respects. We'll see you soon for another episode, and in the meantime, take care.